Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending our webinar on the ROI of cybersecurity. Really looking to talk to people. Security is a big thing for everybody right now, but I've brought Terry along because Terry has been a CISO for quite a few organizations, and I've actually been the guy that handles some of the, I would say, the sub-CTO side of it, handling the controls side of what security means for a company. And I think a lot of people been kind of getting it wrong of how to really look at security. So really want to get Terry in here to talk about from his position and from his experience, what he's seen with security and how people should really be looking at this as a business function, not just as a task, it's something for them to do. So I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Wayne Roy. I'm the CEO of TroyNet. TroyNet is a IT consulting firm. We're really focused not on tactics. Tactics is, hey, I buy a bunch of stuff, I just need to plug it in. We're more a strategic company. We like to look at things from a business perspective. What are you trying to get accomplished? And what are the tools that can allow you and your staff to be able to accomplish what you have to have? We consider ourselves strategists more than anything else. Been around for quite a long time, have worked with many verticals, healthcare, finance, legal. So we do have a good breadth and depth of understanding of different needs for organizations. Terry, if you could you talk a little bit about yourself so everybody knows why they should listen to you and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you. So my name is Terry Zimniak. I like to think that I've been security before security was cool. So I've been doing cybersecurity for 25 plus years. Started very technical. So I was doing consulting back in Chicago, very hands-on penetration testing and architecting big solutions. So that was the first decade of my career. Second decade, Wayne, I was functioning as CISO of very large companies. So I got a decade of experience as CISO or CISO for large companies across the US. And I think that's what kind of got me more tuned into the business part of cybersecurity, running as a vice president. And I know that's a lot of the topic today is how business and cyber need to align and how they're really kind of two sides of the same coin. And then post working big companies, lastly, Wayne, I'm currently running as a fractional CISO. So I've got a number of small and mid-sized companies where I really provide that cyber strategy level. So I help them through conversations of what's cyber risk, how secure do we have to be, and kind of help them get there working with partners like TroyNet.
Phenomenal. So I'm going to touch base on a little bit what we're going to talk about today. And just, I'm not going to drown everybody with slide decks. I am not a fan of a bunch of slide decks. So bear with me. I have a phenomenal amount. I have about 4 slides, and that's about it. We're going to have an open dialogue, open conversation. I think that's the best, and how people get the most value is really communicating, talking with instead of talking at people about topics. So some of the things we're going to go through, these are some of the top questions that we've seen out there. Things like, why can't you afford to ignore cybersecurity in business? I've kind of grouped them together. The first 2 is really about responsibility. If you really want to sell everything there, it's about responsibility. The next set, what do officers need to know about cybersecurity in the business arena? Understanding jargon, that's more about frameworks. What should you be considering when you think about security? Security is not this thing where you just buy a bunch of products. You should be following a plan. And we're going to kind of talk through some of the frameworks, some of the security frameworks that's existing, that's approved, that companies should be looking at for the framework for how their security looks in their organization. It shouldn't be ad hoc. Another set of questions is going to be around controls, procedures, and policies. What are those things? What do they really mean? You hear them all the time. You hear people throw these buzzwords out, controls, procedure, policy. But what's the difference between a control and procedure? It's the difference between a procedure and a policy. And where does that apply to my company? And then we're going to talk about whether you're CEO, CIO, CTO, or CFO, what's the dollars and cents you should be considering? What is my cost scale that I'm looking at from our organization? How much should I be pouring into this before I go, that's too much? Or how do I know I'm not even putting enough into that from our organization. So we're going to kind of hash through it. So Terry, tell you what, instead of going through a bunch of, wait, I got one more thing. I'm going to pop one more slide, guys. And this is who we are. Terry explained who we are, and I'll explain why we're doing this is our 6th event, I believe, Brian, this year. We're really about giving back. Okay, this is not about doing a sales pitch or having anybody buy anything. We're about giving back. I had to learn what I learned from people sharing with me. So we're trying to find good people like Terry to bring into these events to be able to talk about what you guys should be doing to your business, because that's us giving back to you. You know, we're in the business of helping business. We're not in the business of being IT or selling products or selling things. It's about helping organizations to improve what they have. Even if you don't call us or you don't use us, if we've given you one talking point or something you can bring back to your business, then we've done something right. So with that said and done, Terry, let's jump in. Let's kind of talk about the responsibility side. Okay. Can you talk about why can't companies afford to ignore cybersecurity? Why is it such a big thing right now? And I know everybody's talking about the buzzwords, they hear it on TV and all that, but let's get past that. As a business, why should I really care?
Yeah, cybersecurity has been, people have been thinking differently about cybersecurity over the past couple of years. And really what it is now a conversation of a business risk. So business owners already have to deal with financial risk, competitive risk, regulatory risk, things and outside influences that can impact your organization you can't fully control. Cybersecurity is the same thing. It's going to be something you're going to have to be aware of. You're going to have to reduce the risk, mitigate the risk, deal with the risk. You're never going to be 100% secure. Just like the rest of your risks, you're never going to get them down to zero. So it's really a change in the mindset of the leadership group of it's not buy the right widgets and we're secure. It's be aware that there's this nebulous concept of risk out there, cyber being one of them. You be aware of it and you got to deal with it accordingly. Now, the secret in what we're seeing more and more is dealing with it leads to concepts of business resilience. How is your business going to function in a breach? And that's really, Wayne, what led to the conversation of business. Because if you have a cyber incident, the problem isn't necessarily have a virus. The problem is your business can't function. So it's business resiliency. If your business can't function for a day, a week, a month, what are you going to do? And that's really been the transition to business risk. And that's how people are considering things these days.
And I'm glad you said that, because you and I spoke about it more than once. We're trying to change. I know it's about just language and words, but getting people away from cybersecurity, because that's more of a buzzword, to look at business risk, almost like how you have workers' comp, or you're looking at risk for your employees. Look at security as a business risk. What are the things that may affect your company, whether it's reputation, financially? What are the things when it deals with technology that may be a risk? And it's not just exclusive to hackers.
Yeah, agreed. And it's more than just technologies. You got, weather, you got floods, you got the pandemic. When COVID-19 comes around, we able to shift and manage the business in this new environment. But I'd like to share a story with you, Wayne. I'm down here in sunny North Carolina. We had an issue about 5 or 6 years ago where Charlotte City in Mecklenburg County was hit by ransomware. It was a big deal because a lot of the government services were offline or running slow. And there was ransom payout, and they got it all put back together, and the news cycle buzzed down. But I was talking to the CIO later, and she told me that they were able to get things running pretty quickly, but not all of the servers were up for at least 7 weeks. Now think about that business owner and business leader. What if some of your business functions are down for 7 weeks? What does that mean for you? Payroll and processing and communications, whatever else you have to do. If your business functions are offline, what are you going to do? A, what are you going to do? And B, how do you manage that level of risk? You're never going to get your cyber risk to zero. That's something we all got to hear. You're never going to get those risks down to zero. You want to get them down a lot to get them close to zero. and then manage the business risk. If you can't pay payroll for 7 weeks, what are you going to do? Going out of business, maybe where you end up. But how are your business processes going to function if your cyber risk becomes realized and something bad happens?
Yep, and we're going to dig deeper into business resilience because people don't understand that concept enough. But what I wanted to talk about, remember I mentioned responsibility. What I really want to relate to a lot of people, and you talked about that business being down for that time frame. A lot of people think the tech people are the ones that are impacted. What's truly being impacted and who has the true responsibility are the C-level, because at the end of the day, when you have to talk to the board of directors or whoever have the stocks and shares for the company, they're not going to hear, hey, IT, they're going to hear, hey, you're C-level, you're responsible, explain to me why this happened. When the media comes around, it's the C-level now has to go on and say, hey, we had this happen. And they're going to go, hey, if you notice some of the big breaches, some of the large companies, they're actually going after the C-level and saying, hey, you're responsible. Your head's on the block. They may try to yell down, but at the end of the day, who's going to be in the news is going to be the C-level. That's why I want to take it away from a tech challenge to a business challenge. And the gaps that we see in security is it's always left in the lap of the IT people who are making decisions of a business that doesn't understand the full scope and the impact of a business. We got to take this thing upstack and understand that security has nothing to do with a bunch of IT tools. It has to do with your business, the risk around your business, and what things you've put in place to make sure that if something does happen, my head is not on the chopping block as the C-level person in the organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think IT's done itself a disservice over the years that historically when your cybersecurity lead was presenting to leadership, executives, boards, they would come in with what percentage of vulnerabilities do we have patch? How many emails do we filter? So IT's message up historically has been, here's all of our technical measurements. This is how we validate our program. Nowadays, more and more often, it's got to be a risk conversation of, we're aware of these things are happening. This is what we're doing with it. This is how we measure the risk. And it should be coupled in for bigger organizations. There probably is already some sort of risk management process bundled in with those processes. If you're maybe at a smaller company that doesn't have formal risk processes, you still at least have those conversations of, hey, business leaders, this is what we're seeing. Here's the risks. But again, that's part of the shift from business leaders as well as IT. Stop talking about bits and bytes and start talking about risk.
Yep, talk about risk and talk about, hey, what is your true responsibility if I'm a business owner or I'm C-level? Business responsibility is, how can I, if a breach happens, because it will, do you agree with me that if you really want to be hacked, you will get hacked? The trick is how far in they got and what were they able to access and what's the damages around that. If somebody breaks into me and they take my kid's photo, I'm upset, but it's not going to impact my business. It's how far they get in. It's understanding it's not about, you cannot go to court and say I have antivirus, but you can go to court, and we're going to touch on it in a few seconds, that, hey, I follow best practice from my organization. C-level has to prove best practice. And saying, hey, I have a outsourced IT company that does it, or I have these tools that does it, does not answer that in court. What it is do I have documentation to validate I've done best practices across my business to protect employees, customers, and vendor information? It's not just one. So it's all encompassing. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things they can do. And, I'm putting a segue into framework because I'm a big advocate for frameworks.
All right, let's do it. I love frameworks because frameworks, the value of that is then it's not business owners saying, well, Wayne says we're secure, therefore you're secure. Or Terry says we're secure, therefore we're secure. Wayne's a smart guy. I like to think I'm a smart guy. But instead of having us redefine the measure of secure and come up with our own biases and articulate what Terry thinks secure should be, go leverage a framework. And if I was a business owner, I would star that right now on your notebook. Find a framework, because a framework is going to give you a comprehensive view of whatever you're dealing with. There's some really big ones out there. You may have heard of ISO, you may have heard of NIST. There's frameworks out there, but the gist of a framework is a lot of experts have gotten together, and for whatever the realm of the framework is, they've articulated what you have to consider. So in NIST, for example, they talk about, do you know your stuff? Do you have protections for your stuff? Can you detect if something bad happens? Can you respond if something bad happens? And then can you recover? So if you heard of NIST, that really is the gist of the framework. But notice how comprehensive that is. It's not you need a firewall, and it's not you need antivirus. It says you have to know your stuff. And within that, it talks about who are your vendors, who are your partners, who are your employees, what's your data, all those sorts of things. So that really the takeaway is get a framework to facilitate a comprehensive conversation for your business.
I agree. And remember, so we're strategists. So every one of our clients, we actually use a framework, period. There's no guesswork around it. There's NIST, there's CIS, you mentioned ISO, there's CMMC. It all depends on the organization. And what a framework allows you to do is, now, remember we talked about best practice. Framework allowed me to go to a situation where something happens. And they say, did you follow best practice? Instead of you saying yes, and they go, how? And you go, well, I got IT and they did antivirus. But if I say, hey, I followed NIST, or I followed CIS, or I followed CMMC, or I followed ISO, that says, hey, I followed a framework that's delivered that says this is best practice for security, and I've met all these requirements. They're going to say, well, you did due diligence. And it's not ad hoc.
Agreed. And if you have artifacts to that effect, it will certainly mitigate any negative impacts. So you're right. If the regulators come in, if the lawyers come in, they're going to ask for your policies, and your policies will support your framework. And you can show that you have an intentionality to your program.
That's great.
So I absolutely, that will definitely lessen any of the negative impacts. A lot of regulators are looking for that nowadays. Your insurance companies, your clients, when you want to sell to clients nowadays, is more and more common, Wayne, that clients will say, before you sell to me, show me you're secure. Yep. And part of that show me you're secure could be, we are NIST aligned. We've completed a SOC 2 audit. We've done whatever. But again, those frameworks and those structures really help you tell the story of your program.
Yes. And you mentioned something that's very important. You said insurance. Just because you meet the insurance requirements does not mean you're secure. Okay.
Absolutely.
That is not security. Security is a business decision. It's not something that a insurance requirements, because they're minimal. They haven't even figured out what they want. I deal with an insurance company, and we do it all the time. We personally have gone through the process of doing NIST and CIS for our own organization. It can be daunting if you don't know what you're doing. It's not as crazy. It's getting easier, but the following a framework is for the company, and the insurance policy you fill out is just for the insurance company. They can come back with new stuff and say, hey, you didn't meet the requirements. So do not just do the bare minimum and saying, okay, I did stuff the insurance carriers has. That has nothing to do with business risk and business security.
Yeah, I agree. I would not want to be a cyber insurance guy for all the way in the world, because that whole industry is struggling. You know, the rates are jumping through the roof. People are having trouble finding insurance providers. And to your point, Wayne, more and more insurance is coming to you and saying, the insurance folks understand, actually, they're a great source of information because they're doing the payouts and they're doing the validation. So if you ever want some fun reading, go look at the cyber insurance payout statistics from the insurance companies. They know where the bad stuff is because they're paying the bill for it. But to your point, the insurance policy or the pre-validation will include some very minimal checks. Do you do multi-factor authentication? Do you backup? There'll be 5 or 6 of the most common egregious security things, which would, boy, it give you one step up on the security ladder, but I wouldn't consider that secure. but it is meeting the minimum. And then I'd add one more point to that, Wayne. For those that have insurance, and everyone should have some kind of insurance, make sure you understand the requirements and the exclusions. So the cyber insurance policy will have statements saying, you must contact us within X number of days of a breach. You must use our service provider for certain cases. You must, whatever, if you don't have patching in place, sometimes I've seen exclusions for concepts of best practice. So read the policy even after you get it and make sure you maintain compliance with that policy statement, because you may be in breach later down the road and don't get a payout when you need it.
Great. I'm a big advocate for beyond what the insurance carriers tell you, because it's not enough. So let me ask you, what are some of the initial steps that people can use to evaluate the impact of security threats on their company?
Well, we kind of talked about a little bit, but talking about how security can impact your business. So there's an exercise called a business impact analysis. And the idea is, what are your key business processes and what does it mean if you're down? So again, payroll, people often forget about that, but if your payroll is down for weeks or days, are you going to risk losing employees? If your uptime requirements, if you're a manufacturer, if you accounts receivable, accounts payable, think through what your key business processes are, and then work through the technology that supports it, and then the security that could be risks to that. But always start with, what does a business do and how does the business do it? Those should be your starting points for the conversation.
I actually agree, because dealing with a lot of companies, my first question would be, what are you trying to secure? What's the most important thing to you? And a lot of times they're not even clear of what they know, the application they use, but they don't even know, they have not categorized, that's the proper language, categorized the data they have and the importance of each bits of data. What's medium, what's shared between employees, what's management, what's C-level, what's board level, okay? And then saying, hey, segmenting out accounting separate from everybody else. They know they're doing it, but they couldn't tell you where it is, who's using it, and where it might be. So we always suggest, first step is, again, what you said, evaluate your company, what's important to you. Second step on the technology side is to do a security assessment. Security assessment, right off the bat, have a company come in, do a security assessment. That'll tell you and give you a baseline for where you are security-wise. And then from there, you can build up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of that foundational stuff, all the reports discuss the concept of cyber hygiene. 99% of the attacks you see are rehashed attacks on vulnerabilities that are months, if not years old. Rarely is people dealing with 0-day attacks, the most cutting edge stuff. Be aware of it, but honestly, if you don't have your hygiene in place, if you're not patching everything, don't worry about China breaking in for the 0-day attack. Patch your stuff.
Yep.
Turn on your multi-factor, turn on your encryption, do your backups. All that foundational cyber hygiene, these tools and these moderate level assessments can easily identify it. And you'll see all the reports that everyone talks about is phishing. To prevent phishing, you got to scan your email and you got to have multi-factor. To stop ransomware, you got to patch, you have to have your encryption, you have to have your backup. It's these foundational concepts a lot of people struggle with. And absolutely, Wayne, a simple, moderate scan or simple assessment will tell you a lot of it, frankly. Though the next step being, what are you going to do about it and how you can maintain it?
Well, what I like to use an analogy for people to understand what assessments are. Okay, you make believe that you decide today that you want to be an athlete. Hey, I want to be a top-notch runner, or I want to be a football superstar. To do that is the first thing you need to get in shape. Is it the first thing you're going to do is do a bunch of push-ups, start lifting weights? But you want to be a professional at this. The first step you do is go to your doctor and give me a diagnosis. Tell me where I am physically. So now I can put a regimen together to get myself into shape to be able to be that athlete. That's your business. You don't start doing a bunch of stuff. Find out where you are right now. Find out your what was the hygiene you said? The security hygiene or
Cyber hygiene. Yeah.
your cyber, exactly. Find out your cyber hygiene right now. And then from there, remember I said you have to have plans. From there now, you can match it up to those frameworks we talked about, the CIS, the NIST. I am like this now. I need to make this requirement. Now I have a plan in place. Instead of spending money on a bunch of stuff, then doing it and then finding out the stuff you have really doesn't do what you need it to do and ripping it out and spending more money again to redo it. I see so many companies do it the wrong way. Get the assessment first, figure out where you are, get a plan from that, and now have a roadmap to get you where you need to go and put it towards a framework.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And the way I usually present it to business leaders is let's first establish how secure do you have to be? Where do you want to be? Do you want to be Fort Knox? Probably not. Do you want to be irresponsible? I sure hope not. So let's figure out where you need to be, and then how are we going to get you there? So that's exactly the assessment will tell you where your gaps are. You may have a technical assessment, maybe a business assessment, but decide where you want to be, figure out where you are, and then a roadmap to get you there.
And something people are going to see a lot is controls, procedures, policies. This is a conversation you're going to hear when people talk about security. And I'm going to touch on it, and please give me your spin on it. Controls are technical things. Controls are things that I can put in place, like MFA. Those are controls. Antivirus, those are controls. Those are physical things you put in place. Policies are, hey, how does my company say I should use these things? Procedures are, hey, this is how we're going to go about doing this thing. Okay? You have to have all three of them. You have to have policies. When you go to court, courts are going to say, what policies, written policies you have in place that you can show me and prove that your employees have agreed to for your organizations. Policies are like, your vacation policies, my best use policies for computers, my email policies. Okay, your procedures are, hey, if you need to use emails, this is the way you're going to go about using it. Those are procedures, but your policies is really what you take to court. And the policies should be in-depth and broad. And I know you deal a lot with policies, Terry. Talk a little bit about the policies and tie them in with the procedure and controls if you could.
Sure. No, that's good descriptions. Policies really are your statements of what your business does. We will do multi-factor for all remote access. We will train people on how to phish. So basically, it's your rules. It's your statement of what your program is. And the advantage really is then you can measure yourself to your expectations. So if you say you train once a month, that's in your policy. You can validate your program's doing what it's meant to do. So you find a gap. We're worried about people clicking on emails. Our policy says we train every quarter. And then you have someone execute and train. So it's really your statement of your rules is what your policy is. Procedure, as you described, pretty straightforward, how we do something. Controls, I'd say maybe I think a little more broad, in my opinion, than how you phrased it. Not necessarily technical. A control is really any mechanism to reduce a risk. May well be technical, but on the phishing side, we train people. That's a type of control. We need 2 people to change bank routing information, which is a common attack in phishing. That's the type of control. So the control is a general protection that can help on anything.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely correct, because there's also physical security, and a lot of people forget about that. Do you have door access to your server room? Do you have somebody when they enter the facility to access that facility that may have exposure to personal data? Did you have them sign in, and do you have some type of NDA with that person? I absolutely agree as well. Okay. Biometrics on doors, signing, those are controls as well. You're absolutely correct on that. Now, a lot of people struggle with, and you talk about business resilience. So I want you to go back to business resilience, because that's going to tie in. People always ask, how much does business security cost? Okay. And that's a broad question, but before you go there, let's talk about resilience, because there's a method to the madness.
Well, yeah. So again, resilience, the idea of resilience is how does your business function in an adverse scenario? We're talking cyber, but many years ago, I was working at Sears, corporate Sears and Kmart. We were asking, what are we going to do when the hurricane comes through and hits our store down in Louisiana? Business resilience. How do we function as a business? So it really comes down to, again, know your business, know what you do, and then how are you going to function if your technology fails is the resilience side. And then cost kind of ties into that whole thing. Cost really depends on how secure do you have to be. So go back to that same question. How secure, what's the right level of security for Wayne's company? Fort Knox, again, don't want to go there because you're going to go bankrupt trying to get there. You don't want to be irresponsible. Actually, one more story, if I can throw it out there, Wayne. I gave a series of presentations for legal groups here in North Carolina, and the legal industry was new to me, so I did some research. The American Bar Association, which supports all the lawyers, the American Bar Association had a cyber report and guidance. And their guidance, the American Bar Association guidance to small legal practices and cyber really comes down to be pretty good in cybersecurity and then buy a lot of insurance. Okay. So if you think back to what Wayne and I have been talking about, there's your hygiene, do all your hygiene, do your patching, your users, your terminations, your multi-factor, and then figure out what you're going to do if something bad happens. That's not a horrible way to deal with cyber risk. You know, maybe the scale shifts, but again, fix what you can, fix what's reasonable, and then what's your business resiliency? Can you do payroll if something bad happens? Can you process orders? Can you healthcare? Can you take care of patients, whatever it may be? Go be pretty good at security, go be really good at security, but don't expect perfection. And then make sure your business can run even if there's an attack.
Yep. And I wanted you to reiterating back to resilience. I love your story you told earlier about that company was down, would you say 7 days before they were able to get back?
7 weeks.
7 weeks. So
and that wasn't a business, that was Mecklenburg County. That was the county for Charlotte.
that was, so when people say, hey, what should I be considering for budget? You're going to look at that scenario and look at your own scenario and say, hey, if I was down for that time frame, what is my cost? What's the cost of my business risk? And from there, you say, if this thing wound up being $20 million, would a $1 million investment be worth it? Do you understand? That's where you kind of equate. You rather lose 20 million or invest 1 million? Would you rather lose 1 million and invest 20,000? You kind of figure out, you know what's the impact to my company if this thing happens? My employees are not working, so I have the cost of employee, I have the cost of not operating, the loss of revenue, and also people don't equate the loss of a reputation where, hey, I've now lost the trust of my vendors and my customers. I have to reacquire that trust, may have to get new clients back in. What is the overall cost of that? That is how you calculate how much you're going to invest in security. Because if you have a high dollar amount, then you know you investing 10% of that, that's nothing to what you may be able to lose. So you use that as there's no exact answer. Nobody's going to say, hey, it's just this dollar amount. There's no magic bullet. Is you understanding your organization, understanding your revenue, understanding downtime and the cost for that downtime. That is how you calculate what your business, the cost of the business risk.
Agreed. That's risk management is what that is. Absolutely. Understand your risk. Because what it can lead to, Wayne, is again, you don't want to spend $1,000 on $1 million problem, but conversely, you don't want to spend $1 million on $1,000 problem. So risk management, what's the impact? Again, these are not bits and bytes conversations. It's what's the reputational risk? Can we sell to clients if we have a bad reputation for security? Downtime, what's it going to cost us downtime? It's a business risk conversation that then leads to fixes typically in the IT space.
Exactly. And that returns back to now ROI. Hey, what's my ROI? Your ROI is, again, if my loss is 20 million, but I invested 500,000, so I've just gained $19.5 million. That's your ROI. because now you've mitigated that risk and reduced that. You know, a lot of people don't think through, hey, they think through, hey, unless they see instant gratification, which is broken and somebody's working, that it's no, you're minimizing. It's like driving a car. Would you rather crash your car to get your insurance premium that you've been paying into, or you rather avoid that completely? You know, it's you don't want that thing to happen, and you're going to do things to reduce that risk of happening. That's your ROI. That's what you're looking at.
ROI has been a bugaboo in cybersecurity forever because it's hard to justify the cost from a business perspective because we are risk avoidance. You know, what's the ROI of making sure your employees are properly trained in whatever sexual harassment, whatever it may be? Other business risks, you have to manage that as well. And what's the right spend to deal with those risks? I think the better answer, Wayne, or people should be considering is you can make cyber changes that A, reduce risk, but B, add value to the business at the same time. And that's really the secret. So going to the cloud improves availability if done correctly. It improves security if done correctly. And it adds other business value. Now you're in a new architecture. You can connect to people easier. You can do this. You can turn on AI. AI's all the buzz these days. If you're in Azure, you can throw a switch and you have access to Chat GPT and all that sorts of stuff. So drive down the risk, but consider the business value too, and that should be part of that conversation.
That's actually phenomenal. A lot of people forget it, and I forget it as well. Because people are looking at so many ways to control things, they've learned to be very creative in finding ways how to give access to people that's remote. Applications, hey, how do I just get these things to be more automated? It has changed a lot of how people can get resources now, you know? So yes, yeah, I agree with you completely. That is a factor that's actually missed, is how by looking at these tools, you can actually improve business performance, not just business security. That's
exactly. So that's why when you do your cyber strategy, your 18-month, 24-month, whatever it may be, it should be aligned with IT strategy and it should be aligned with business strategy. If your business plans over the next 2 years are to buy, to sell, to go to new markets, to offshore, new products, whatever it may be, that should influence your IT strategy and influence your cyber strategy. Now, for small companies, that may be a minimal exercise, but you have to have some plan in place. You don't want these three independent programs kind of running business that way, IT that way, and security this way. There's got to be some kind of overlap to make sure they all support each other, because if you secure for offshore and you're not doing offshore next year, you may have wasted a lot of time and money.
Well, phenomenal, because that ties in exactly what we've been trying to relay is security is a business decision, not an IT decision. That strategic planning, that operational efficiency is a part of the overall security planning and strategy. And it's a C-level conversation that builds out that plan. It doesn't come from IT up, it comes from the top down, which is very important. Terry, we're running out of time. Actually, we're at the top of, we're over by 8 minutes. Anything else you want to throw in?
No, I would say maybe the one tip, Wayne, if you're a small business owner, business leader, small, mid-size, start with a framework. Think about what you're trying to do and how you're going to measure success. NIST has a framework out there. Again, ISO, FTC, and Small Business Administration, they have a simple framework as well. Some kind of framework to measure your program against, and then just start checking off the boxes and work through that with a partner like Troynet. But some kind of structure is what you need to move forward. Figure out where you're at, where you want to get, and just start checking the boxes off.
And I would suggest everybody start out. NIST has been around longer. CIS is a lot more straightforward in how they lay out their framework. Starting with CIS will give you a leg up on understanding NIST. I think it's a better framework for somebody that's never been involved to start in. Like I said, we deal with all those frameworks. With that being said as well, we talked about the security assessment. We have a free basic security assessment for any company that needs that starting point where they can touch bases and just see foundationally where they are. We can do a free security assessment to just give them a foundation. And then from there, you can look at your framework and say, hey, where do I need to take it from? We also have, which is a side note, free Microsoft license audits for companies, which we think is phenomenal. People think that also the licensing is really on a cost thing, but when we do an analysis, we also look at how you have the 365 set up and kind of look at the security posture in the 365. So that's a good starting point for people as well. One is about $1,000, but one's really the foundation for the assessment for it. So go to www.tronet.com/assessment, and you can get the security assessment. The link is up there, as well as if you have any questions for myself or Terry, you can reach out. My email is there. Send me an email. I'll connect you up with, if you want to speak to Terry, I can connect you to Terry. We can get on a call. We can chat. We're here for you guys. Don't feel obligated as you reach out to us. It's us trying to, what's a good way of saying it? Pushing ourselves on you with a sale. We're here to help companies. That's what we do. We feel that if we help companies, that'll always come back to us someplace along the line. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out with us. Terry, phenomenal job. I really appreciate you jumping on the webinar with us and talking about these things with people. Anybody have any questions, shoot an email and we'll get back to you and answer any questions you guys may have. With that being said, phenomenal job. Thanks, Terry. You have a good one, okay?
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, take care.